In this video, I'm going to walk you through all the basics of Amazon KDP leading up to an effective strategy to make $10,000 a month. There are thousands of courses on how to get started with self-publishing, but in my opinion, there isn't a free, honest guide that shows you exactly what you need if you want to jump into this business from scratch. Also, I'm sure a lot of people watching this video are in the same situation I was when I first started. I had very little money to invest, and all I wanted was to make enough to pay for college and rent. So don't worry if you're afraid you can try it just because you don't have any money to risk. I started with nothing a few years ago, and now this is one of my main sources of income, earning me at least $15K a month. Now, before we dive into the actual video, a quick intro. I want to be clear right away about the skills you need to succeed in this business. I think learning how to create technically good books with properly designed covers and layouts is key. You don't have to be a graphic designer, but in my opinion, this is the most important skill to develop. Aside from that, what you really need is a strong drive to research, brainstorm, and come up with creative, effective ideas. And if your question is, how long will it take to make 10K a month? I'll give you an honest answer. Your earnings depend on a mix of factors, including your marketing skills and your ability to understand what people want, but the real game changer is commitment. Based on my experience, I can't give you an exact timeline. When I started years ago, I somehow made 25K in my first 2 weeks, but then didn't even make 4K in the next 2 months. So the only thing I can say is that with experience and constant improvement, you learn what factors lead to a successful book. Alright, now that we are done with the intro, let's get into the actual content. The first thing we need to discuss is the types of books you can create for Amazon KDP. This is important because it's not just about classic novels. There are other categories that offer earning potential. Let's go through them one by one and look at the pros and cons of each. There are 4 main categories. The first one is no content books, which are all those books with identical pages where your job is simply to provide a space that the customer can fully customize. Generally, notebooks fall into the no-content book category, as do agendas with no customization, just the date and space to write. Essentially, if we can call them that, they're like commodities. What I mean is the real value doesn't come from the user experience of the product, but simply from its utility. It's kind of like when you need gas. You go to the nearest gas station, not necessarily the one that offers a more exciting or engaging experience. What matters with no content books is simply their usability, with the only possible customization being an eye-catching cover. For this reason, in my opinion, in 2024, it's not worth creating this type of book due to the very low barrier to entry and the minimal added value from the author. Plus, Amazon is already flooded with these notebooks created through KDP, so it's really pointless to dive into a market full of low-cost books with such high competition. The second category is the famous low-content books, which are basically a slightly more guided version of no-content books. For example, this category includes prompt journals, logbooks, and planners. The advantage over no-content books is that while these are still simple and repetitive to create, there's more opportunity to add value for the customer. Let me explain. Let's say you want to create a planner specifically for gym lovers. You might think a planner is just a planner and that you can customize it much, but you can add features that make it more suitable for your target audience. For instance, you could include spaces for them to write down their workout plans for that day, or even reminders for stretching sessions or taking supplements. Of course, the competition in this market is very high, but I can't say there aren't opportunities to earn money, even though the challenges are quite similar to those of no-content books. Now let's move on to the 2 categories I believe are the best. In order, the third is mid-content books, which are filled with content featuring non-repetitive and highly customized pages, but they aren't entirely written out. Let me give you some examples to clarify: recipe books, activity books, coloring books, workbooks, and so on. There are potentially endless types of mid-content books because they're tailored for a specific type of customer. In this case, the barrier to entry starts to increase since they require more time to create, but on the flip side, there are greater pricing opportunities. The book that performed the best during my self-publishing journey was an activity book that I priced $18 per copy. On top of that, the big advantage of mid-content books is that if you have a knack for finding creative solutions to problems and can design products that look amazing, you can truly make millions. Regarding this category and the next one, since I believe they are the best for anyone looking to start a self-publishing career, I'll dive deeper into them in just a bit to show you how to potentially create bestsellers. The last category, as you might guess, is high content books, which include all fully written books. We can split these into two further subcategories: fiction and non-fiction books. The difference is pretty clear, but just to be precise, fiction books are novels and those you read purely for enjoyment, to tell a story, whether made up or real. Non-fiction books, on the other hand, are mostly educational, like manuals or concept explanations. For example, a book about the key marketing concepts in 2024 would be a non-fiction book. There's a lot to cover with these types of books, so we'll go into more detail in the next section. Before we dive into how to develop your books, I need to make a disclaimer that will save you from a lot of the issues I faced over the years. Let's take a moment to talk about copyright rules, the risk of getting your KDP account banned, and especially my use of AI. When you sign up for Amazon KDP and start uploading books, you need to be careful. While you can make endless mistakes like creating poorly designed or nonsensical books that just don't sell, there are other mistakes that aren't tolerated at all, even if it's your very first book. That's why I strongly recommend reading the entire Amazon KDP guide, as it covers almost everything and will save you from many future problems. I'll talk more about copyright issues in other parts of the video, especially when I explain how to create certain types of books, but for now I want to share how to handle it. What I've learned over the years is this: the more you do yourself without outsourcing, or worse, pulling things straight off the internet, the fewer risks you'll face. What does this mean? For example, when it comes to images in my books, I always prefer to draw them by hand using Procreate to avoid any problems. I know your first concern might be, what if I can't draw? Or what if I don't have an iPad? My answer to the first is, you should definitely learn how to do some basic drawings, but you don't need to be a pro. I'm not either. When I first started, I would use existing drawings from Pinterest, trace them, tweak some details, and make them my own. As for the second question, I didn't have a tablet at first either, but it was the first investment I made with my KDP earnings. Of course, for your first few books, you can avoid using images on a lot of pages, or you can also draw on a white sheet of paper with a black marker and digitize it using Photoshop or other tools. There are many tutorials on YouTube about that. That's what I did with my very first book, which ended up making me enough money to upgrade my work tools. When it comes to trademark violations, what you need to do is pretty simple. There's an official website that acts as a global database for all registered trademarks. When you're deciding on your book's title, always check to make sure the words you're using aren't trademarked. Typically, single words can be trademarked unless you're using them in the same way, but my advice is to check combinations of words or well-known phrases too. Let me give you an example. If your book was called the 50 Couple Challenge Book, which is a great title for keywords, you could put the whole title into the search bar and you wouldn't find anything, of course. But if you took just the phrase couple challenge you'd quickly see that it's a registered trademark, meaning you can't use it. I'm not sure about the legal specifics, but unfortunately, speaking from experience, Amazon doesn't care. If the trademark owner files a complaint, Amazon will simply block your book and likely ban your account. So be very careful. A lot of you are probably wondering, can I use AI to generate images or text for my books? I'm a bit of a traditionalist in this area, meaning I avoid using AI to prevent any potential issues, but that doesn't mean it's not useful or that you can't use it. When it comes to text, I would avoid AI altogether, mainly because you can't be sure if what it generates is plagiarized from somewhere else. Plus, ethically, I prefer to use AI as a support tool rather than something that creates the entire product. For images, I have a different opinion. You could use AI-generated images from something like Midjourney, but there's always a risk involved. Again, I prefer to create everything myself, but in my view, the most interesting way to use AI is for inspiration. I use Midjourney to find inspiration for my book covers or to come up with ideas for illustrations for a coloring book. If you really want to, you can trace those images on Procreate, like I mentioned earlier. Now, let's dive into how to create mid-content books that sell tons of copies. The first thing you need to understand is that if you want to succeed as a self-publisher, you have to stop thinking that if you make hundreds of books, eventually one will sell, or at worst, you'll learn a little from all of them. Every book you create needs to be made with the intention of becoming a bestseller. Of course, that won't always happen, and you'll make mistakes just like I still do plenty of times. But it's the level of effort you put in that needs to change. So always choose quality over quantity. For mid-content books, this means deeply customizing your book for the niche you are selling to. Like I mentioned earlier, if you are creating something for gym lovers, make sure to tailor the book to the specific need of that niche. Ideally, start with a topic you know really well for your first books, so you understand the pain points or the problems you're trying to solve. Every detail has to be perfect. Don't make silly mistakes like leaving pages blank by accident or not aligning your text properly. Always go through your book from start to finish at least 3 times before publishing it. Obvious errors will always be seen by customers as a lack of quality. And remember, the pages should always be clean, not cluttered or overcrowded with stuff. Leave space to keep the pages organized and visually appealing. Now, let's take a closer look at the 3 subcategories of mid-content books that I believe are the best, one by one, and understand the most important factors to keep in mind. Let's start with activity books. These are books that offer interactive content like games, puzzles, and quizzes, usually for kids. Here's the thing, in my opinion, these books don't make sense anymore, and I'll explain why. You've probably noticed that Amazon is flooded with them, and that's because there are tools that allow you to create things like Sudoku, puzzles, and games in just 5 minutes, lowering the barrier to entry a lot. So when I say activity books are profitable, I'm specifically talking about activity books for teens and adults. There's a huge opportunity here. Think about books that offer ideas for things to do during specific times of the year, or books aimed to specific groups like friends, family, couples, or even people who won't spend time alone but don't want to be bored. I think one of the biggest mistakes beginner self-publishers make is focusing only on kids when people aged 15 to 30 offer a huge market opportunity. The second category I love is workbooks. Workbooks are perfect if you know a specific topic so well that you can teach it to others, providing exercises and practical tasks. For example, if you're really good at a language, you could create a workbook to help others learn to speak it fluently. I know what you're thinking. There are already hundreds of them on the market, but I want to invite you to think deeper about your ideas. Just because there are already many players in the market doesn't mean there isn't a room for a better player. You should always be thinking about how you can do something better than what's already out there. If you find even the smallest gap, jump on it immediately. For example, if you want to teach a language, you could add QR codes for people to scan and hear the correct pronunciation or download interactive content. This will immediately increase the perceived value of your product, leading to more positive reviews and eventually more sales. And if you don't have any skills that will allow you to create a workbook, it's simple. Don't do it. Not because it's wrong, but because there are so many book categories out there. You just need to figure out which one you're best suited for, so you can offer the best possible product to your customers. The last category I want to talk to you about is coloring books. I don't want to repeat myself 1,000 times, but if you know how to draw, this is the right category for you. If not, you can always create other types of books. Amazon is already full of the same kind of books with AI-generated drawings that aren't even in the right style for coloring. I really can't stand that, but on the other hand, I see a huge flaw in it that can be targeted by people who are more skilled and can provide much better books. My advice here, again, is to lean more toward creating books for adults, because the drawings for kids are usually very simple, and even those who use AI can create work that is considered acceptable. On the other hand, adult coloring books need a higher level of detail and they should have a cohesive theme. What I suggest, if you have an iPad, is to use AI to generate illustrations you like, then trace them yourself, making clean outlines with plenty of space for coloring. Avoid adding tiny details that fill the image with too much ink. This can be a solution for those who aren't skilled at drawing, but I repeat, you need to find the category that best fits your skills. Work on it until you create a nearly perfect book, and then move on to learning new skills that allow you to expand your library of books. To wrap up the section on mid-content books, I want to explain how to find the right ideas for your books. I want to make it clear that this part is specifically about the idea itself. We'll talk about titles and covers after we've gone over the high-content books. When I do market research, I never start with keywords, probably because when I first began, I didn't follow any specific tutorial, and this method came naturally to me. But in any case, I think it's the best method and it's completely free. You don't have to pay for software, which can be very useful but isn't strictly necessary when you're just starting out. Invest your money only after you've learned how to generate income. There's always time to upgrade later. What I usually do is think about a specific niche and the problems that niche can have. You can use ChatGPT to help you with this, but I always suggest starting from your own experience to make the process as authentic as possible. For example, one of the first books I created was for couples, and I came up with the idea after thinking about the problems couples like me and my girlfriend might face. One of the first things that came to mind was that every time the weekend rolled around, we had free time but always ended up staying at home and doing nothing different. I quickly realized this could be a common problem for a lot of people. So I created a book with date ideas. Were there already similar books out there? Absolutely. Which is why I work hard to make mine unique and more appealing than the others. To sum up, you need to start from a problem and work to solve it in the best way possible, but most importantly, by thinking differently. In my case, what made that book take off was the fact that I also made it into an album where couples could pass photos of the different experiences they have thanks to the book. That was a genius idea because the book instantly gained more value. Not only did it give ideas for things to do, but it also offered the possibility to keep a photo record of those moments. The last piece of advice I'll give you about finding the best ideas is use Amazon a lot. During the process I just explained, you should always check out every single idea that comes to mind and see if there are already competitors. This will also give you the opportunity to combine different ideas into nearly perfect books that offer a complete experience. Let's move on to high content books. Like I mentioned before, there are two types, fiction and non-fiction. I'll start with fiction because it's quicker to cover. And in my opinion, if you don't want to be a writer, it doesn't make much sense to pursue it. And I'm not just talking about the ethical side of things, because if you're here, you likely want to make money. Here's the thing. With fiction, you have two options. Either you write the books yourself, but if you're not good at writing, it's probably not worth it, or you hire ghostwriters. However, I wouldn't recommend using ghostwriters for fiction because these books tend to be more expensive to produce. If you find cheap writers, there's a good chance you'll end up with a copy of someone else's work, and like always, Amazon really doesn't like that. So I think fiction books are better left to those who are passionate about writing or want to make a career out of it. But if your goal is simply to make money on Amazon, I recommend focusing on non-fiction books. Now, just because you're in it for the money doesn't mean you should create low quality products just to make a few sales. Your goal should always be to deliver the best possible product for your customer. Non-fiction books are usually educational. They explain concepts on topics you know well and find interesting. For example, all those personal growth books are non-fiction. All the books teaching marketing techniques are non-fiction. But really, you can pick any topic and write a non-fiction book. The key here is to make sure your book solves a problem people have. Let me give you some examples of books that are already out there on Amazon in the US market. Let's say you're great at making personalized jewels and want to start your own Etsy store, but you need to learn more about it. You would go to Amazon and search for how to sell on Etsy for beginners. Boom, you'll find several books that explain exactly what you need to do. Or let's say you're about to adopt your first puppy and want everything to be perfect. You'd search on Amazon for how to raise a puppy and you'll see tons of results. But let's dig a little deeper and think about more uncommon problems. Your little brother is about to start high school, but he has no idea how to study properly. So you search how to study for teens, and once again, you'll find tons of books to solve that problem. That's the power of non-fiction books. They solve endless problems. But if every problem has already been addressed, is the market saturated? Well, it depends. It's like I said with mid-content books. If there are gaps or weaknesses in existing books, you should jump on that. If you can make a book that's better than what's out there, maybe the covers are bad or the books don't go deep enough into the topic, then you have a good chance to succeed. What I usually do during my market research is read through the reviews of competing books to get a sense of what's missing or what I could improve on. This is a great way to find opportunities. Don't even think for a second that there aren't gaps in the market. You can write a book on almost any topic and there will always be a specific niche or people willing to buy it to solve their problem. The key is to do a lot of research on Amazon and on other platforms. For example, I often browse Reddit to come up with interesting ideas. People there have all kinds of problems and it's easy to see if the issues mentioned are shared by others. This can help you identify common problems that you could address with a book. Let's get practical. Here's how to create your non-fiction books. You have two options, as always. Either you're great at writing or you have someone else write for you. There's nothing wrong with outsourcing, but I just ask one thing: hire professionals. I usually avoid platforms like Fiverr or Upwork because a lot of times the same content is sold to multiple people without you knowing, which can cause big problems. My recommendation is to use ghostwriting services like the Urban Writers or similar. Of course, if you enjoy writing and know your subject well, you could pay someone to proofread and edit your book, which is much cheaper. But if you're just starting out and don't have the funds to invest, focus on mastering mid-content books first and reinvest your profits as you grow. What I'm about to cover is one of the key elements of your book to actually be successful, maybe even the most important of all. The title. How do you come up with a title that aligns with the problem you want to solve, describes the actual content, and is also psychologically effective? Obviously, the answer isn't simple because there's no universal method, but I've tried to summarize the approach I use. First of all, the title should always be chosen before you start creating the book, because if you can't find a suitable and effective title, it's pointless to dive into the content. What I do, once I've decided on the book I want to create, is go on Amazon and try to describe the problem my book solves in as many different ways as possible in the search bar, thinking about how a potential reader might search for it. This immediately helps me note down which words are more successful, but also which ones don't yield promising results in terms of reviews or cover quality. Next, I focus on using both keywords where there's a gap in the market and those I know are heavily searched because there are other books performing well. This will help your book show up in both kinds of search results. At first, you might only get found through the less competitive keywords, but after generating sales and getting reviews, you'll start climbing the rankings for the more popular keywords too. That's what I do to decide the content of the title, but the form is another crucial factor. Like anything else, the title needs to follow certain rules that play on human psychology. It should create a sense of curiosity and desire that pushes someone browsing to make a purchase. Usually, when I teach people what I do, I try to use concepts I come up with myself. However, one thing I really appreciate from Alex Hermosi is the value equation. It's simply perfect for describing how you should write a title, so let's go over it together in case you're not familiar with it. In the equation, at the top, the numerator, you have the dream result you want to achieve multiplied by the perceived likelihood of achievement. At the bottom, the denominator, you have the time required multiplied by the effort and sacrifices. All of this equals the value you're providing. Let me explain it in simple terms. Everything at the top, the higher its value, the greater the final value will be. On the other hand, everything at the bottom, the higher it is, the more the final value drops. So if we want the perfect title, we need to include the dream outcome we aim to solve, make the customer feel there's a high chance they'll achieve it, minimize the time required while still being honest about it, and make the effort seem as minimal as possible. Again, always staying honest. Now, you don't always have to include all four factors of the equation. For example, if we are creating a book about how to become a good investor, we might call it Easy Investing, Build Your Retirement in 5 Minutes. As you can see, some of the terms automatically suggest easy and minimal effort or time required. If it's an activity that realistically takes years, it's better to leave out the time factor and focus on reducing the perceived effort while increasing the value of what's at the top of the equation, and vice versa. I hope this explanation was clear, but if you need any more clarification, feel free to write it in the comments and I'll make a video specifically on this topic. Let's move on to the next key topic, another aspect that needs to be taken care of down to the smallest detail. The cover. If your book cover is bad, everything else you do becomes completely useless. In this case, Forget the saying, never judge a book by its cover. The cover is everything. I can tell you from experience, even though I've been using Photoshop and other graphic design programs for many years, I'm definitely not a graphic designer, but there are a few things I've learned over time which I consider the golden rules. There's one thing that's absolutely essential on a cover: the title. The title must be visible, clear, and stand out the most. Everything else is secondary. Remember, adding more elements isn't always the best idea. In fact, often when things aren't done well, people end up filling every corner of the cover with unnecessary stuff. Keep it simple and make sure your cover stands out. The example I want to show you is a book called Dopamine Detox. It has over 9,000 reviews and the cover couldn't be better. A solid color background, a simple color combination, and the first thing that catches your eye is the title. Now, if you prefer a less minimal style and you can represent the core concept of your book with a simple drawing or image, go for it. But always remember not to clutter the cover. To illustrate this, let me show you a few covers that I think are great. For example, take this book called New Driver's Guide. As you can see, even though there's a bold illustration, they've left the top part of the background empty, which makes the title stand out properly. Though honestly, I think they could have chosen better fonts, but still, it works well. Another book that you probably all know, though it wasn't published with KDP, is The Psychology of Money. The cover is genius. The title is perfectly highlighted thanks to the white background and the minimalism of the design. The masterstroke is the brain made of dollar bills. It's such a simple yet effective drawings that makes the cover just perfect. The last example I want to show you is from another famous book published this year, $1 Million Weekend. Here things are even simpler. Like I said, the title always dominates. Look at how big it is compared to everything else. It takes up practically half the cover. The illustration is super simple, just the outline of a hand, nothing more, yet it conveys the idea perfectly. I showed you these examples instead of books with more elaborate covers because I wanted to highlight how effective simple covers can be. Solid background colors, no overly complicated or unreadable text, simple but smart, well thought out drawings. This is what you should aim for, especially if you don't have a deep knowledge of graphic design. Personally, I create all my cover using Photoshop, but for ease of use, Canva works just fine too. Just make sure you don't use their elements like drawings for your covers because Amazon doesn't like it when the same images are used for multiple books. As for illustrations, I do everything as usual on Procreate with my tablet. In this case, using AI can work too, but keep in mind all the precautions I explained earlier. The concept I'm about to explain might be the one that truly helps you take your journey to the next level. We've said that our goal is to create the perfect solution for a problem that a specific type of customer has, right? So if you're putting all your knowledge and skills into this book, and most importantly, your book is solving that problem, then why compete on price? Never compete on price. Compete on the skills you teach or the value you bring to your customer. This applies to all kinds of books, whether they're mid-content or high content. For non-fiction books, it's easy to understand this concept. In fact, sometimes we feel more justified in charging more for a fully written book. But even in this case, the price shouldn't depend on the competition, but rather on the value you provide to the customer. The same goes for mid-content books. If you create a workbook that helps people pass a university math exam because you know how to explain difficult concepts in an incredibly simple way, there are people who will be willing to pay you hundreds of dollars for that. Now, I'm not saying you should charge that much, but you should definitely give your creations the value they deserve. And honestly, when people see a higher price, they immediately expect more. but they also place a greater value on your book. It's then up to you to not sell books that are useless or lacking real applicable skills. So once again, don't compete on price. My best-selling book ever is an activity book that cost $18. But guess what? People are absolutely willing to pay that amount if you offer a product of superior quality. Alright, we have finished the practical part. I know there are a lot of topics to cover, and maybe I've skipped over some to focus on what I think is most essential, but this video is already quite long. I want to make sure that first and foremost, the core concepts of this business are clear. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments and I'll either respond or cover the topic in more detail in a future video. Now let's move on to what I think is the most interesting part, the marketing strategy. Pay close attention to what I'm about to say. This strategy does not include ads, not because they're not useful and not because they aren't a tool that can free you from the limits of trading time for money, but because this guide is designed for those who want to start their journey without investing a lot of money upfront. I began in the same situation where money to invest wasn't an option, and on top of that, I was afraid of spending money without knowing exactly what I was doing, and yet I managed to earn over $20,000 in a single month thanks to this completely free method I'm about to explain. Ads were only something I started using after more than a year, once I had the right knowledge and was comfortable creating books that could potentially become bestsellers. My advice is this: start the way I did, with the strategy I'm about to explain. Then, once you have saved up a nice little fund, reinvest it in equipment, outsourcing, courses, and eventually ads. But first, learn how to make great books. Let me quickly summarize the strategy and then I'll walk you through it step by step. First and foremost, what you absolutely need to do is create a brand. Basically, a series of books under the same author name. Once that's done, the second step is to start publishing content on social media to showcase your book to millions of people. This will bring you visibility, sales, and reviews. The third step is to re-engage your existing customers through a well-thought-out email marketing strategy. Don't worry, I'll explain exactly how to do it. It's simple, you just need to understand how to work smartly. Step 1. Create your brand. Let me explain what this means. Let's say you've never published a book on KDP before, or maybe you did, but you didn't know what you were doing and you're not happy with the results. So let's start from scratch. We go through the entire process of creating our first book, market research, deciding on the title, creating the cover and interior. Everything is ready and you've created a great book. Now let's imagine your book starts selling a lot of copies, whether organically, through ads, or using the strategy I'll explain later. It doesn't matter. The book is selling like crazy. If you want to create a second book but under a different author name, maybe just because you want to switch topics, you'd be missing out on a lot of benefits. What you could do instead is create more than one brand. For example, use a pen name for your series of vegan cookbooks and another pen name for your adult coloring books. My advice is to start building your first brand with at least 3 books so that you can fully implement this strategy. After that, you can easily branch out to other brands. Here are the advantages of having a brand with multiple books connected by the same theme, style, and author name. First, if your book does well, a customer might want to buy another book from you. Second, even if they don't know you have other books, you can easily convert them into repeat customers through a simple email marketing campaign. Third, a brand is like an investment for the future. If you build it with care and passions, it could keep growing and eventually reach a point where you could sell your entire book series to a buyer and make a lot of money. These are all the reasons why you absolutely need to start with a brand. Step 2. Make your book go viral. When I first started my journey on KDP, I had no clue how to get people to see my books, but I've always had a knack for finding creative solutions. I used to see these TikTok videos every day about dropshipping products, and the crazy thing was that they were getting millions of views. I always thought this could be a smart tactic, but I was worried that the market was already flooded with this kind of book and that people would immediately know it was a product being sold, not just a cool thing being shown off. Well, first of all, I was wrong. That was a bias I had because I knew the tactic, but most people have no idea what dropshipping even is. Secondly, there's a way to make sure people don't realize you're just making a video to sell them a product. Simply film yourself using it. This tactic is so simple, yet it's incredibly effective. In fact, it helped me earn over $130,000 from just one book using this strategy alone. It's mind-blowing when you think about it. Of course, after years of using this method, I've learned a few things that can help make it work even better. Here are some recommendations. First, the book, your product, is king. If your product isn't good, no one will care about your videos and no one will buy it. Second, TikTok is a super useful platform because it makes it easy to get your videos in front of the right people. So you need to help the algorithm target the right audience. Third, it's not as easy as it looks. Well, I mean, it's a method that requires effort. I don't want to tell you that there's a way to make millions with zero effort, because that's just not true. You have to put in a lot of work making tons of videos. I personally create 2 or 3 videos a day for each TikTok account I manage. And trust me, I have quite a few. On the flip side, the return on this effort can be incredible. And once you start making enough money, you can outsource the video making process to others. At some point, you'll be able to earn almost passively. In any case, I've created a completely free guide on how to make potentially viral videos on TikTok. I know from feedback on my other videos that people who have downloaded it find it super helpful for getting started. So definitely check it out. It's linked in the description below. But what are the advantages of this method? Simple. If one of your videos goes viral, people will already be familiar with the content of your book. This leads to purchase decisions based on the real product, what it actually is, rather than relying on reviews or where it ranks on Amazon. This is a massive advantage because it generates sales and reviews, which will push your book to the top of Amazon searches. Plus, the reviews will mostly be positive since customers will already know exactly what they're buying thanks to your videos. It's an insanely powerful tactic. Step 3. Reconvert your existing customer. This is a strategy I had always underestimated and only recently integrated into my method, but it's just too valuable not to use. I'm talking about email marketing, a way to get your customers to purchase from you more than once. So we've reached the point where our books are being promoted on TikTok and other social platforms, generating reviews and sales. But these aren't the only things we can achieve with this strategy. We can also capture leads. But what is a lead? It's information about your customer. In our case, it's simply their name and email address. Why is this so important to get this information? Because through content marketing, meaning the content we share on social media, we generate the sale of a book. But through email marketing, we can reconvert that same customer into purchasing other books from the same brand. Even better, we can launch a new book successfully by ensuring some sales right from the start. Plus, we can request reviews, which increase the chances that other customers will read those reviews and make purchases. But how exactly do we apply this method? We talked about the concept of a brand. Let's start there. As we are creating our first book in a brand, what we need to do to obtain the lead from our customers is to include something in the book that encourages the reader to voluntarily give us their information. This is called a lead magnet. If you are interested in this strategy specifically, I can make a separate video about it. But to help you understand what I'm explaining now, let's jump into an example. Let's say you've decided your brand is all about vegan cooking, and your first book is titled How to Cook Delicious Vegan Meals in 5 Minutes on a Budget. Perfect. You fill the book with everything you know on the topic, recipes, tips for creating better dishes, how to balance protein intake on a vegan diet, etc. I'm not an expert on vegan cooking, so I'll leave it at that. Now you want to capture leads, you can start your email marketing campaign. On the first page of your book, you include a message explaining that by going to a certain link, readers can get a free bonus recipe list in addition to what's already in the book. This way, many customers will think, great, I can get even more from this book and for free. By clicking on the link, the only thing they're asked for is their name and email address in order to receive the bonus recipe list. And that's how you put this strategy into practice. Afterward, all that's left to do is create automations, emails that are sent automatically. The first one, of course, is the email that sends the free lead magnet and should be sent right after obtaining the lead. The second email could be sent a few weeks later asking for a review if they like the book. All other emails will be sent manually to everyone in your email list whenever needed, for example, while launching a new book in the series. This will give you a huge advantage because everyone who received the free lead magnet and liked the book will know about the release of another similar product and they'll be more likely to buy it. But how can you do all of this? Of course, there are tons of services that usually cost money. But good news, some websites offer free service up to a certain number of subscribers. This will allow you to test the strategy, and of course, you can pay for premium services with the money you earn from sales. For example, a Weber is free for up to 500 subscribers. This is email marketing explained simply and I hope clearly. I hope everything is clear. Check out the free guide in the description and let me know what you think. That's all for today. See you in the next video. Bye.